Hi, Ben here from Trident Fly Fishing. I've got a very exciting new rod review for you today. I've got the all-new Scott Meridian. Now, if you haven't heard about the Meridian, it's Scott's brand new saltwater high-performance rod. So everybody seems to like this rod, and we're gonna tell you why. And we're gonna do you one better because we're gonna compare it to our old favorite, the Loomis NRX. So let's start with the Meridian and show you some of the great new features on this rod. First, it's important to know that Jimmy Barshey and the team at Scott designed this rod from the ground up to be the best saltwater rod ever made. And this starts with the fighting butt. Even on this 8-weight, you've got a pretty substantial fighting butt, and it makes it a lot more comfortable and actually a lot more useful than the small fighting butts you see on other rods. As you can see here, it's also capped off to make sure that your line doesn't get tangled. Next, the Meridian probably has the best reel seat in the saltwater fly rod business. And that's because, first, their mil-spec 3 anodize that makes it extra hard, extra durable in that saltwater. Another thing that makes this really great is that it's not a round reel seat. So the ring here that locks your reel in doesn't wobble around. That's something we've seen from Scott in the past in rods like the Tidal, but it's a really nice feature because you're never fumbling around with that reel seat to get your reel on. Next, pretty standard now, is this full wells cork grip. The cork at Scott's a little bit better than some of the manufacturers out there, I think. It's just something we see to add to that top-notch build quality. Then, as we go up, we've got really perfect wraps on this rod. It's one of the most beautifully made saltwater rods out there. I think Scott does an incredible job with that. As we move up the rod, they of course included alignment dots to save you that extra time when you're rigging up. And we get to our first key build feature, full titanium ceramic stripping guides. They're really great. They reduce the drag through the guides, but more importantly, the titanium is not going to corrode at all, even after years of saltwater use. So now we're gonna put this rod down and take a look at the NRX so you can compare and contrast some of these features with that on the NRX. So one thing that's important to note as we go through the features on the NRX and compare them to the new Meridian is that this is not the most recent version of the NRX. This is my personal NRX that I've been fishing for a long time, and they've made a couple of changes, mostly cosmetically, in the newer version. But let's get started. First, you can really see the difference here in these fighting butts. The NRX has a very small fighting butt, whereas the Meridian has transitioned to a much bigger, in my opinion, much more useful fighting butt. The NRX then has a carbon fiber insert, which makes the rod a little bit lighter, and that moves into a very similar full wells grip. And again, on the newer version, the cork is much nicer, and the grip is much more similar to the Meridian, so there's really not going to be a lot of difference there. As we move up, you've got the same awesome build quality on the NRX. Then we come to one of the big cosmetic differences that's in fact not just cosmetic, which is the first guide. The NRX is equipped with recoil stripping guides, which I actually think are a little bit lighter and a little bit nicer than the Fuji guides on the Meridian. However, the ceramic inserts probably do reduce drag a little bit. I think the weight savings on the recoil guide is a little bit better. The other thing you'll notice is that the diameter of the first stripping guide on the NRX is much smaller than the diameter on the Meridian. So that means that if you have a tangle in your line and a bonefish is ripping it out, it's a lot more likely to get caught on the NRX. Going above the stripping guides, these rods are virtually identical. You've got the same recoil snake guides on both rods, and there's really not much more to say. We're gonna get on to the more important aspect, which is seeing how they both cast. So for the first part of this casting test, we're taking the Scott Meridian out at 35 feet. And I gotta say, this new Scott Meridian is really, really good at 35 feet. It's got a nice soft tip, and it's probably the most accurate rod I've ever cast at this distance. Certainly the most accurate 4-piece. I'm gonna give the Meridian a 10 out of 10, 35 feet. See how the NRX does. we've got the NRX at 35 feet. And I gotta say, this rod is still great at this distance. I think that little bit heavier tip really helps you make that accurate cast in close. So I'm gonna give this a 10 out of 10 at 35 feet as well. It's really good. There's no real discernible difference between the NRX and the Meridian at this distance. So we've backed up to 50 feet, and it's pretty clear that the Meridian is still really good at this distance. It's got nice tight loops, it's got oodles of feel. I'd normally give it a 10 out of 10 right off the bat, but I know the NRX is also really good at this distance, so I want to cast that first, but I'm going to give it a tentative 9.5 out of 10 at 50 feet. In our previous comparison test between the NRX and the Zephyrus, we talked about this 50-foot distance being the best distance for the NRX. However, I'm going to say that the Meridian is as good, maybe even a little bit better than this rod at this distance. I'm going to give the NRX a revised 9.5. and the Meridian a 10 out of 10 at 50 feet. So backing up to our final distance, 70 feet, got the all-new Meridian. And I gotta say, this is one of the most phenomenal rods I've ever cast at this distance. It's really unbelievable how accurate it is. I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10 at 70 feet. I just can't imagine it getting much better than this. So for our final part of this casting test, we've got the NRX back at 70 feet. Both these rods are pretty accurate at 70 feet, but the Loomis is just a little bit softer and you have to slow down your stroke. And to me, that makes it a little bit less accurate. So I'm gonna give this rod a 9 out of 10 at 70 feet. So after casting both of these rods, it's really clear that we've got two really great fly rods. However, for this particular test, I'm gonna have to give the edge to the Scott Meridian. It's really one of the most accurate fly rods I've ever cast across all of our 3 key flats distances, and I just can't say enough good things about it. One thing that the NRX does have going for it is its ability to cast lots and lots of different line weights. It's still a very flexible rod, and I'd love to get this new Meridian out into the cold saltwater of Maine to see how it performs with a sinking line or a heavy intermediate line, because I know the NRX does all of those really well. But for casting this Bruce Yard Tropical Punch and pairing that with our Hatch 7 Plus, that combination with the Meridian is unbeatable. The new Scott Meridian retails for $865, while the NRX retails for $805. Both of these rods are available with free secondary shipping from tridentflyfishing.com. If you have questions about the new Meridian or the NRX or about this review in general, give us a call at 888-413-5211 or email us 24/7 at support@tridentflyfishing.com. And don't forget to leave a comment and like this if you enjoyed the video. I'm Ben, thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.